Tonight, the chair of the British Medical Association here lit a fuse when he suggested we could look to the Republic to improve our health service. We'll ask if changing to an all-island model or sticking with the status quo would be better for GP care here in Northern Ireland. And we'll also get reaction to today's COVID inquiry criticism of the Stormont executive. Also tonight, two big thinkers have prompted the debate, but what do those who could ultimately decide our constitutional future actually think?
I think we should be going into the whole debate with the view that we should be pushing for United Ireland. Like it is right, and I don't think there's any issue there that's not solvable.
Did anything in there change your mind?
Not at all. I think it's pushed me more towards against a United Ireland. The people voting for a United Ireland don't even know what they want.
And how could we potentially solve some of our issues with constitutional change? We'll hear from an academic who's taken a look under the bonnet. The biggest budget in the Northern Ireland Executive and the biggest headache, health and the financial problems facing Mike Nesbitt, are rarely out of the headlines, and one of the key pinch points is, of course, general practice. This week, the chair of the BMA in Northern Ireland set the hair running when he suggested we could do well to look across the border for ideas on how to improve one of the most critical parts of our health service. And Dr. Alan Stout is with us tonight. We also have Dr. Matthew O'Fueloin, a GP from the Republic, the DUP's health spokesperson Diane Dodds, and Sinn Féin's Philip McGuigan, who chairs Stormont's Health Committee. Welcome to all of you, and thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. We'll come on to all of that in just a moment, but we do need to talk first of all about the COVID-19 inquiry's conclusion that decision-making in Northern Ireland was chaotic during the pandemic. Diane Dodds, the inquiry's second report examined government decision-making at the time and concludes that some meetings of Stormont's power-sharing executive were deeply divided along political lines and beset by leaks leading to an incoherent approach. You were a minister in the executive. What's your response to the report?
Well, first of all, Mark, I have been in committee all afternoon. I didn't arrive home until well after 7 o'clock tonight, and I actually have missed most of the coverage of the report. I, of course, fully intend to read it. And to look at the recommendations that Baroness Hallett has brought forward. And I think we also need to acknowledge that COVID was an incredibly terrible time for everyone here in Northern Ireland, for those who lost loved ones, for those who couldn't see their loved ones as they died, and for loved ones who had to stay in nursing homes without any contact with families. These were incredibly difficult times, and we need to take a little bit of time to look at the report, to soak up the details of the report, and to respond to the report.
OK, but we know it was a very difficult time, and we know that ministers who were responsible for taking finely balanced decisions hadn't had experience of anything like this before. Mm-hmm. But it is, and I accept that you've been in committee this afternoon and you may not have seen the details, but when I quote some of the report to you, I'd be interested to hear your response to it because you were there at the time. The report says Sinn Féin and DUP ministers failed to put the common interest of all above their party political interests at critical points during the pandemic. It says in Northern Ireland, the power-sharing arrangements weakened the ability of the executive to respond, and decision-making by the Northern Ireland executive itself was marred by political disputes. Do you recognise those criticisms? Do you accept that they're valid?
Well, again, I'd need to see the context in the report for those criticisms. But we operate a mandatory coalition in Northern Ireland. That mandatory coalition has parties with very, very different views on many, many things. And can I say that the vast, overwhelming majority of decisions taken by the executive were taken without any controversy or without any real issues whatsoever. I was there and I saw it. So I think what I need to do is see exactly what the report says, the context for the criticisms, and then consider it from there.
OK, well, the Ulster Unionist Party has issued a press statement tonight. It held the health portfolio, of course, significantly under Robin Swan. It says it's clear that DUP colleagues were largely driven by political opportunism and sought to create division within the executive rather than focus on the collective challenge. It is hard, is it not? And you might be hearing that for the first time, but it must be hard for you not to read that as a direct swipe at you because you were sitting around the executive table at that difficult time.
Well, hot kettle and black comes to mind. I mean, this is an opportunity that Robin Swan and the Ulster Unionists have taken to have a swipe at the DUP. Let's take a little bit of time, Mark. Let's consider it. Let's make sure that if such a thing, and God forbid that it would ever happen again, that we actually are well prepared, that we have a considered response, and that we have a contingency plan that is fully operational and able to be stood up at very, very short notice. I think you'll find that in the report there are many issues that could be held against whoever within the executive. And I think that kind of coming out swinging, and I haven't read the Ulster Unionist statement, so I don't know the whole of it at all, is not really that inappropriate. I think our thoughts tonight should be with those who still grieve.
OK. Philip McGuigan, your party was also in the executive, so many of the criticisms that I've just mentioned and many more that I could mention and might mention in a moment or two apply to your party as well. Do you think they're valid? Are they fair? Are you embarrassed by what's been said today?
Well, I mean, I like Diane, was on the committee, but I have heard some of the news coverage. I've heard some of the families' reactions. So my thoughts, first and foremost, are with the families who lost loved ones during COVID. I mean, as you quite rightly pointed out, COVID was an unprecedented global emergency. So the executive, like administrations across the world, were experiencing something that they hadn't experienced before. So I think this report is an important milestone for all of us in terms of learning lessons and making sure that mistakes that perhaps were made will not be made should we encounter such a pandemic in the future. Well,
there are explicit criticisms of your party. The report said on multiple occasions decision-making was marred by political disputes between the DUP and Sinn Féin ministers. It said Michelle O'Neill attending the funeral of Bobby Storey in June 2020 contributed to tensions in the executive. What's your reaction to that?
I think the issue of the funeral has been well aired. Michelle herself has made her own commentary around that. She said she wished that didn't happen.
So it's a valid criticism by Baroness Hallett, is it?
She understood that it harmed public messaging. So, I mean, I think a lot of this isn't going to be new to people in terms of the report. I think what is important is that we learn the lessons and ensure that any mistakes that were made aren't made in the future.
Yeah, it was reasonable, is it not, for people to expect their politicians to have done better? Another line from the report: regrettably, some political leaders in Northern Ireland were not always able, in this time of extraordinary crisis, to set aside political and sectarian divisions and to govern jointly and effectively in the interests of the whole of Northern Ireland. I mean, do people in Northern Ireland not deserve to be governed in their best interests by our politicians? And this report says that simply did not happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, as I say, you know, I don't think any administration anywhere in the world wouldn't be facing criticism of how they handle particular scenarios. We have a mandatory coalition here. I think from Sinn Féin's perspective, and I wasn't on the executive, I think in all instances we tried to follow the medical advice, which is important that we did.
OK. Well, not in the case of that funeral, of course, which we've referred to. Let me bring in Dr. Alan Stout now. Did anything in this report surprise you?
Unfortunately not. Actually, the thing that immediately sprung to mind for me was the lead-in to Christmas 2020, and that was probably the most chaotic time. I think it's well referenced in the report, where we seemed to go in and out of lockdown, and there was a lot of indecision and so on at the time. And actually, I remember at the time the department phoning me and saying, they're not listening to us. Can you come out and say something? And actually, I think our chair at the time, Tom Black, was very vociferous on this very programme that evening. But there's also a positive in the report as well, and we can be very, very negative about the report. And actually that particular time leading into Christmas, and the report does say that one of the successes which was a huge success, was the vaccine rollout, which was done at pace and quicker than anything that we've ever seen and done before.
Yeah, I have no idea what public reaction will be to what we've heard from our two politicians so far. They've both said that they were busy today and aren't across the detail of the report. They knew they were coming onto a live television programme to discuss health tonight. So, people will make up their own minds about precisely the conversation we've had and the nature of that conversation. But did people deserve better in terms of the decision making from our politicians, from some of our clinicians, and from some of our health decision makers? Because I imagine that's what some people might be thinking tonight, and that's where they might see something positive in this report. It's holding people to account for decisions that were not always taken as well as they might have been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it is important that it's critical of the entire UK response. It's not specific to Northern Ireland.
Yes, but we're focusing obviously on Northern Ireland, but that is the case. And that was very clear from our network news earlier tonight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the learning point for us is that decisiveness. And we sometimes you can have too many voices, and I think that comes out loud and clear that it needs to get passed through the Assembly, through the Executive, and you've got lots of different input where you need to have a much more focused and decisive input.
OK, let's move on, because we've other important issues to discuss on the programme as well tonight. And the key issue we do need to address is whether or not an all-island health service would see benefits for patients on this side of the border. Now, Dr Matthew O'Fuelorn, you made the case for the Republic's GP model at a recent conference here in Northern Ireland, just last weekend, in fact. What would you point to as the key things we could learn from the system on your side of the border, perhaps?
Well, I was speaking to kind of the perspectives from the GP system in the Republic of Ireland and some of the strengths that we've come to enjoy over the last few years, having come from a position during our economic crash of absolute destitution within general practice, where most general practice in the Republic of Ireland was on the verge of collapse, with all our GPs emigrating abroad. And that got transformed from 2019 onwards through the launch of a fully funded and appropriately funded enhancement to the public aspect of our primary care and GP system down south. In particular, we had a launch of a chronic disease programme where people with chronic conditions had fully funded and paid visits to their general practitioner twice a year, with outstanding outcomes stemming from this programme, such as the programme has won international health awards. For instance, we had a 45% reduction in uncontrolled diabetes between visits 1 and 3. That's over a 1.5 year period in participants in the study, as well as a 14% reduction in smoking and obesity levels over a 1.5 year period for participants in this programme. So I was making the case that there were some parallels between the general practice in the Republic of Ireland 10 years ago and how our colleagues up in Northern Ireland are experiencing, stemming from being underfunded, and the difference that a adequately and appropriately funded general practice can make to better health outcomes. 30% reduction in ED attendances, a 30% reduction in out-of-hour attendances, and a 25% reduction in hospital admissions for patients involved in this chronic disease management programme. Truly transformative changes stemming to our patients from having been fully funded on the public side of our system down here.
OK, so you obviously believe there are lessons we could learn from closer analysis of the system that you have in the Republic of Ireland. But is it also the case that we could perhaps learn those lessons without necessarily signing up to an all-island approach? One does not necessarily follow the other. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm agnostic about the mechanisms through which fully funding quality care for public patients, for all patients, occurs. International research simply states that when you fund general practice, it makes savings in other parts of the healthcare system. And whether that's done on an all-island basis, on a 2 parts of the island basis, it's not that mechanism that delivers the care. It's the funding general practitioners to do the work that they do really, really well for the patients who they care about, and enabling to do it, removing their stresses, removing their underfunding, and getting out of their way and allowing them to treat patients International research and certainly our experience in the last 5 years in the Republic has shown that it results in massive and substantial changes right across the healthcare system. It saves money in the round for the rest of the system.
Well, it's very interesting, Alan Stout, isn't it, to hear from Matthew O'Faolain about what he sees as some of the positives about the GP system primary care system in the Republic of Ireland. Do you think there are clear lessons to be learned, and do you think we would do well to take on board some of the experiences of your cousins on the other side of the border?
Absolutely, yeah. And to put it in context, I mean, the conference that we were at last Saturday, you covered it on Sunday, it was the most difficult conference I've been to, and it resulted in a motion and a vote of no confidence in the Health Minister. I've never heard that before. I'm not sure that I particularly like that. But it also called for a very clear move to a new model. And it was a really difficult, really negative conference. But in the middle of it all, there was an oasis of positivity, which was suddenly this presentation from Matthew from Dublin, saying, and it was a properly jaw-dropping moment for everybody who listened to him, thinking, how are they doing things so much better than we're doing? And even when you just take the two simple contracts, you don't need to go anywhere near a constitutional argument or debate or anything like that. You simply need to say, can we not do something pretty similar to what they're doing to try and get the funding into general practice in Northern Ireland and try and get the outcomes anywhere near the outcomes that they're currently achieving?
Except that you seem to fly pretty close to the idea of an all-island model earlier this week, very publicly, and you've been criticised by politicians, particularly unionist politicians, for that. And then you seem to double down. Just to be absolutely clear on this programme tonight, are you saying you believe that the best way forward is to look at an all-island healthcare system? You may say that's not a constitutional issue, but a lot of politicians would say you cannot have that without entering into a constitutional debate. But is that what you're saying?
No, it's a contractual thing and it's about health outcomes. It's as simple as that. And I was actually very careful in how I worded it. So I said, this is to start a debate, and we absolutely need the debate. There's no question we need the debate because we are doing really badly here. We shouldn't be in the conflict situation that we are with such a fundamental part of our health system. And I also said, and it was actually a challenge to the Irish government as well, because I said using the medical card contract, which is a better contract to the one that we have here at the moment, we should be trying to provide universal health care. And that is true. And I actually believe that Ireland should be providing universal health care to everybody on that medical card contract.
Well, just to be absolutely clear, because I want to hear from Diane Dodds and Philip McGuigan in just a second. You could have a system in Northern Ireland that apes the system in the Republic of Ireland without being part of the same system. Are you saying we need to have a joined-up system where North and South are part of the same whole, which is what a lot of people interpret an all-island healthcare system to mean? Or are you saying we could have two systems that are almost identical, running in parallel with each other, but not crossing over?
It doesn't need to be as complicated as that. Raphael Bengoa summed it up for me very simply. He said, one of the problems that we face over and over in healthcare is that we look at what other people are doing and say, we can't possibly do that because they're doing it. What we have to do is recognise when somebody is doing it better than us. One of the most interesting things from the conference was that the first person to go to Matthew after he presented was our English chair, who was just as interested in their model as I was in their model. And they need to learn as well in terms of trying to do things better, because you've got to recognise when somebody does it better. I have no preference whatsoever in terms of who we contract with. The obvious thing is we use the Irish model and we contract with the Department of Health here.
Okay.
It's as simple as we can possibly get. Right. But we've got to recognise what's better. And absolutely the end point to this is better care for our patients.
OK, well, Diane Dodds, I suppose that's the point. What would be wrong with that? I mean, if I understand Alan Stout correctly, he's saying he does not want to dip his toe in the wider political constitutional debate. But if we can get a system that is better and that is more in tune with what is happening across the border, and it's better for patients in primary care and in secondary care, what would be wrong with that? Do you accept the thrust of that argument?
Well, first of all, Mark, I believe in a national health service that's free at the point of delivery. That isn't what happens in the Republic of Ireland, where there are charges to go to see your GP, charges to go to AD. So I will always stand on that principle of free at the point of delivery. And can I also say, I will give no political cover in any sense at all for anything else, because that is what I believe in. Now, can we learn lessons? Of course we can. We're not blind to the fact that some people do things better than others, and these things happen sometimes in cycles in other countries. But we would always need to remember that the Republic of Ireland levied charges on almost half the population.
Okay,
and that is very, very important.
Okay, I don't want to cut across you, but it is also important to make the point that those who are most in need in the Republic of Ireland do get healthcare free at the point of delivery. And as well as that, alongside it, you can make the case for the NHS and you can say that you believe in healthcare free at the point of delivery. The reality is that it is not a good service in Northern Ireland. It is notionally free at the point of delivery, but the point of delivery could be months or years down the line.
Well, and I wanted to come on to this because I was encouraged at the Health Committee today when the Minister was before the committee for about an hour and a half of his time, where he indicated that contrary to his position earlier in the year when he shut down negotiations with the BMA over the GP contract, that there was the potential that those negotiations could open up again and that his door was always open. Now, obviously, the Minister is not going to negotiate in a public forum like the committee, but I do think that is a positive. I have called openly for months now for the both of them to get round the table to sort out those differences and to make sure that we have a GP service that is fit for purpose. And I was just looking at some answers to questions that I've got. And in Northern Ireland, our GP service is funded at 6.4% of health revenue. In England, it's 9%. In Wales, it's 6.6%. So it's absolutely clear, as Alan Stout said, and I've said, and Alan knows I spent hours with GPs on trying to understand the issues. There is an underfunding of GP services, and I have no doubt that if we can get ahead with what the Minister talks about with his reset plan, then we can deliver services through our GPs more efficiently and closer to people in their own home and in their own community. And I think that that is a huge step forward. I would really like to see that progress.
Well, Diane Dodds has just dropped off there. Her line has gone down, unfortunately, but I'm grateful to her for raising that issue about what the Minister said in the committee today. And I do want to come back to Alan Stout in just a moment or two to get his response to that. But just let me bring in Philip McGuigan. We'll try to re-establish our line to Diane Dodds here. But Philip McGuigan, Sinn Féin's in favour of healthcare. Free healthcare at the point of use. In essence, the National Health Service system, albeit you'd like to see it operating more effectively. That, of course, is not what is on offer to the majority south of the border, as Diane Dodds has quite rightly pointed out, and is unlikely ever to be. So why do you think there are particular merits in moving towards some kind of all-island healthcare system, particularly as far as primary care is concerned?
I don't think it's going to be a surprise to you or your viewers that I actually think all our public services should be organised on an all-Ireland basis, and that the population, particularly in the north, but right across this island, would benefit from such. Nowhere and no public service would that bring better benefits to the citizens of the north than within health.
Well, you say that, but you can't prove it.
Well, I think every metric within health does prove it. I mean, it actually, in terms of being not just better for people's health, it actually would be better for people's life expectancy.
But you say that, but is that actually right? Because, look, it is not all sweetness and light in the Republic. David Cullinan, your party's spokesperson on health in the Oireachtas, regularly criticises the government's handling of health. On the 4th of November this year, he said the cancellation of nearly 1 million hospital appointments in less than 4 years since January 2022 is a mark of shame and shows that government failure is causing chaos in our health service.
Absolutely, and if you allow me a wee bit of time just to explain that absolutely we think both systems can do better. My point is that integrated across the island, we're on one island basis with a population of 7 million people, we can do much better for all the population, both in terms of those living in the north and the south, but by every reliable metric right across the board, within health and across all public services.
But it's aspirational, that's the point.
People in the south are better off, or the waiting lists are better, the life expectancy is longer, there are better access. I mean, for example, just 2 days ago, we had because there is a cooperation across some aspects of health, and 2 days ago, the All-Ireland Congenital Heart Disease Organisation and Cancer Research across the island gave evidence in front of their Oireachtas, both espousing the possibilities and the aspirations and the benefits of All-Ireland cooperation. So the examples are there that when people involved in health work together, that there are better outcomes for people in the north and in the south. And I think that should be the aspiration of every politician living on this island.
Okay, let me bring Alan Stout in today and just talk about what Mike Nesbitt had to say to the Health Committee earlier today. He told MLAs he's hopeful talks can begin shortly on a new contract for GPs. He said officials will be engaging with members of the GP committee seeking clarity over the latest offer. If things go well, he said, we'll open a new round of discussions on a new contract, and he wouldn't go any further than that. That's a positive development from your perspective, presumably, is it?
It has to be, yeah. I mean, let's see what he has to say.
Well, do you take him at his word?
Well, what we have to do, above all, is to stabilise general practice. I absolutely understand his ambition. I understand the neighbourhood model. For goodness sake, I was one of the ones that was involved in setting up the federation model, which he's going to be so dependent on, and I think said at committee today that he is going to be so dependent on as well. But you've got to stabilise core service first, and that is going to need
what would be acceptable in terms of this deal? Because, look, in 2024-25, general practice asked for an additional 1%, which would amount to an additional £80 million, and the health minister gave GPs an extra £1 million. That was far short of what you were looking for, and you said that was only a staging post to what you actually would need. So what would the minister need to put on the table to make that wrong right, in your view?
So, I mean, I think the 1% is important. I think Diane Dodd's figures kind of highlighted that, because it shows that you're moving to what some of the other UK nations are investing in general practice. And that gives you the evidence of why we're in so much difficulty now. The minister, we keep talking about being short of money. The minister could make decisions tomorrow that would free up resource to go and would get pretty close to that 80 million from two simple budgets. One he announced in July, which was on investment in the multidisciplinary team model. Now that's a failed model. That's 9 years old. It's 61 million. What I would recommend that he does is take that entire amount of money and put that directly into core service. Let practices deal with it. Let practices employ the extra staff and let them build the service. And the other budget that he could address very quickly is the rent that is paid from practices to trusts for trust-owned buildings, for buildings that are built and paid for many, many years ago. It would save several £1 million and be directly invested in frontline services.
Okay, I suspect, I can't speak for the minister, but I suspect if he was here, he would say it's not quite as simple as you're suggesting, because there are all kinds of competing demands on those extra pots of money as you have identified them. But look, no doubt we'll hear from Mike Nesbitt in due course, and we'll follow those negotiations with keen interest, as I'm sure our viewers will as well. We're out of time. I wish we had more time, but look, thank you all very much indeed. We've covered a lot of ground so far. Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight. Now let's return to the debate on the constitutional future. Now, on Tuesday, hundreds of young people from a broad range of schools right across Northern Ireland descended on the Lyric Theatre in Belfast to hear the journalists Sam McBride and Fintan O'Toole make their arguments for and against a united Ireland. Darren Marshall caught up with some of the students before and after the debate.
United Ireland, good idea or bad idea?
I believe it would, in the long term, not work out. I think it would create more chaos between unionists and nationalists.
I feel like for loads of people, it's such big of a change. Like healthcare, it's different. The housing systems are different, benefit systems, it's all different.
You know, it's one island. It should be the one country. You know, I feel Irish, and I feel that Ireland should be one country. It shouldn't be divided. We shouldn't have part in the UK.
Do you think there's anything you can hear in the next hour that might change your mind?
I mean, look, if it's not practical at the minute, that's fair enough. Like, I wouldn't push for it if it was going to be bad for the people. You have to put the people first.
Well, I would be for it, but I'll have to see how it's set up first and make sure it's beneficial for everybody.
So you're thinking with your pocket, are you? Or
Thinking about my pocket, I make sure prices stay nice and low and don't go up too high, and like healthcare and stuff would remain free and that sort of thing.
I'm not from this country originally. I'm from Ukraine. But thinking about this matter, I would say I'm more neutral. I would more likely to hear more about economic policies to see what actually can be better, what side can be better for Northern Ireland. Currently, I'd say I'm against the United Ireland just because I come from a unionist background. My family were never really into orange culture or anything, but just the people I grew up with in the area I lived in was just a unionist area, so I grew up being a unionist.
I'm in the middle. I'm a bit sceptical of the current climate that we live in. I think that the idea of United Ireland is a pretty good one, but I just think to achieve that we need to be in a far better position than we're currently in.
are you for or against a United Ireland?
I personally believe in the United Ireland. I mean, we were united before, we can be united again, but I understand why some people might be hesitant. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, so yeah.
Kind of in the middle. It depends what would benefit me, economically.
So, after an hour of debate over issues like health and education, the economy and security, was anyone persuaded to reconsider their position? Half of the room said yes, and the other half said no.
I still think United Ireland should be achieved at some stage, but just under the right circumstances.
Anything in there make you question your decisions?
Mainly just about the NHS and stuff. I think it's important to have the NHS or like a nationalised healthcare system.
I think we should be going into the whole debate with the view that we should be pushing for United Ireland. Like it is right, and I don't think there's any issue there that's not solvable.
Did anything in there change your mind?
Not at all. I think it's pushed me more towards against a United Ireland. The people voting for United Ireland don't even know what they want. They don't have answers to our questions. They don't know what a United Ireland would even look like.
I think, if anything, it's just reminded me like what we went through to achieve peace the way we have it today by signing the Good Friday Agreement like all those years ago. It's like we've done it as best we can. Peace has been like mostly achieved, and by joining up with Ireland again, it would just ruin that.
It has changed my opinion a bit, and if the healthcare was sorted out, I'd be more for a United Ireland, I think.
Well, whenever I went in, I was for United Ireland, but I was also undecided, and I've come out sort of the same. I have come out and I want United Ireland, but I don't think that we're ready for it just yet.
Is there a weak argument for United Ireland? Is there anything you think actually we'd be better off in the Union with?
Well, the main thing that did get me thinking about was the NHS and the medical system in general, which is not great here, but I prefer it up here to down south.
What do you think the strongest argument for keeping the Union is?
That would honestly probably be mostly cultural, at least for me.
The unionist culture and the unionist people being left behind almost is something I find pressing, and also something they touched up on the end there about the prospect of violence and the second troubles is something that I would think about a lot as well.
It's not about sort of changing minds in terms of going from I want to maintain the union or I want to go for a United Ireland. I think it's important in terms of understanding other people's views and how your own vision can be adapted to fit other people in. I think that's probably where these discussions are most important to me. I'm fairly convinced that a United Ireland is the best way forward, but it's important to look at how we include all sort of communities on the island in building that. But I do think there is a large amount of people who remain persuadable on either side, and I think it's important then that we have these discussions to work out, well, what is the best way forward, and I think that today is a real example of how we can do that.
Darren Marshall asking the questions there. By the way, we talked about all of that to Salman Finton, you might recall, on The View a couple of weeks ago, and we featured that discussion on YouTube. Now let's cross over to Aberdeen to hear from an academic who's conducted some research into what women in rural communities on both sides of the border think. Professor Joanne McAvoy joins us now. Welcome to the programme. So you brought together a group of non-political women from North and South to discuss how constitutional arrangements might help to fix some of the problems they encounter. What did you find out?
That's right, Mark. Over the past maybe 18 months, I've been working on a research project with research partners, Professor Jennifer Todd at UCD and Dr. Shelley Dean at DCU. And we brought together in a series of what we call deliberative cafes in different locations throughout the island, women from rural locations and small towns, to extend the discussion about the political and constitutional future, to talk about this issue from their own perspectives and what they would wish to talk about. And what we found is that, firstly, there is a commonality of experience, lived experience, and shared problems. There was convergence across the deliberative cafes in the different locations, which were cross-community and cross-border, around 4 key issues. You focused a lot on health care this evening. So time and time again, our women participants spoke about their frustrations with healthcare. The key issues for them related to access and waiting lists and cost and a perceived scarcity of specialists. They also converged around other issues to do with security and insecurity, for example, experiences of or knowledge of domestic violence, of antisocial behaviour, of drugs in their communities. Thirdly, the environment. There's lots of concern about water pollution across localities, across the island. And finally, then on service delivery, these are women in rural locations, as I've mentioned, and these are interconnected problems to do with infrastructure, about getting to the GP or getting to the hospital, about IT and digital communications and so on.
Okay, so as I understand it, your research didn't begin by looking at the union versus unity debate. You looked at the issues, and then you asked the participants to look at those issues in the context of the debate around the Constitution. Do you think that approach led to a more useful outcome, to better conclusions?
It's a different way of approaching the question, and it allows, it facilitates a deliberation and a discussion from the perspective of the people concerned, of what's important to them. And what we found is that the discussion, importantly, proceeded very civilly. Of course, there's disagreement and issues, but there's also an appetite for mutual discussion and what we call reciprocal understanding of different perspectives and different preferences. So there's value in doing this by getting people together to talk about their key concerns in their everyday experience.
And we're nearly out of time here, but I just wondered, was there a commonality of the issues that were raised from the people you were talking to, you know, from Mayo to Balachi?
Yes, absolutely. These are shared problems in different locations, from Balachi to Cookstown to Longford to Mayo and in Monaghan. The women all converged around these issues, and they converged around thinking about what might be done to ameliorate these problems, and then thinking through the constitutional scenarios that might help address them.
Really interesting to hear how that research went. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight, Professor Joanne McAvoy there. That's all we've got time for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at the usual time of 10 o'clock on BBC One and iPlayer, when I'll be joined by the Finance Minister, John O'Dowd. Don't forget, you can find all of our political output on the BBC News NI website, bbc.co.uk/newsni. Just scroll down to find links for all our programmes and podcasts together. But that's it for now. From all of us, good night.